Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, going solo for this one out here at the barn in Minneapolis. Sadly, there's a little bit too many people on the floor this time, and so I will not be recreating one of the great moments in Scoop Talk history when we had the cleaning ladies cameo. That one was pretty brilliant, but we're not going to be able to do that again. Anyway, about an hour and a half ago, something like that, this the floor in front of me was completely filled with humanity because Minnesota obviously upsets Indiana. Final score of 77-73. Basically, more or less out toughed Indiana. That just as it seemed like Indiana had really established itself as not only the number one team in the country, but the established number one, the true one great team in college basketball. Minnesota comes up and really just out physicaled them more or less. Started with Trevor Mbakwe. Trevor, obviously a former Tom Crean player, was recruited at Marquette. Has been in college basketball now for 6 years, thanks to injuries and transfers and a lot of other stuff. He goes off for 21 points and 12 rebounds. He's been dealing with an ACL tear all year. Not an ACL tear all year. Had the ACL tear last year. Still never seemed to be completely back this year, but tonight he definitely looked it. And just out physical pretty much everybody, especially Cody Zeller and Christian Watford. Those two combined to go 5 for 14 with 17 points between them and 9 rebounds. And Mbakwe just pretty much beat up both of them, more or less. I mean, part of it is, of course, Trevor Mbakwe is a grown man. He's probably 24 by now, 25, somewhere in that vicinity, and Cody Zeller still either 19 or 20. I'm not exactly sure. But Mbakwe played that way. I mean, that is a really brutal physical dude. He's a leading rebounder in the Big Ten. He's averaging close to a double-double in conference games, and just pretty much just put it to both of those guys. Made it very, very difficult for either one of them to accomplish anything, and just kept getting the ball no matter what. I mean, on almost every shot that came off, he was after it, and so was Minnesota in general. Minnesota wins the rebounding battle 44-30. It wasn't really close on that one. 21 points off of offensive rebounds. I'm pretty sure that's the exact same thing as second chance points. To just 8 for Indiana. So, I mean, just on the glass, all in all, Minnesota owns this one. 23 offensive rebounds to 20 defensive rebounds for Indiana. So you're talking an offensive rebound percentage is somewhere in the order of 54%. That's pretty bad. If they have more offensive rebounds than you've got defensive rebounds, you've lost that battle and lost it big time. And Indiana did. Obviously, Indiana came into this game knowing that rebounding was going to be a key, was going to be major. Minnesota was the leading offensive rebound team in the league, getting about 45% of shots that came off on their end, which is a huge number. Knew full well Mbakwe was going to be good. That they had some centers coming off the bench. Elliot Eliason, I think is Elliot Eliason. Rodney Williams obviously was coming back a little bit healthy. He definitely looked a lot better than he has in recent games. And Indiana knew all this coming in, was fully aware that they were going to have to box out and we're going to have to really play physical. And I don't think it was because they didn't realize that or didn't get it or didn't understand what Tom Crean was saying. They just got roughed up. I mean, and part of that is just because it's just that tough to deal with Trevor Mbakwe. He is just that physical of a player, but they did miss opportunities. There were occasions where they really sometimes just failed to grab the basketball. At least in one case, Cody Zeller had the ball fall right down to him, just dropped it. Basically, just dropped it out of bounds 6 times. Minnesota had 6 team offensive rebounds. In most cases, that means Indiana knocked the ball out of bounds, and Minnesota got to keep it. And that happened on more than a few occasions. On a few occasions where they could have got the ball. So just all around the glass just turned into everything. And otherwise it was a pretty even game. Indiana shoots 42.3%. Minnesota shoots 42.9%. Indiana turns the ball over 11 times. Minnesota gives it away 10. Indiana shoots 9 3-pointers. Minnesota only hits 4. But really all it came down to, Minnesota wins on the glass and wins big. And you got to discuss both Cody Zeller and Christian Watford in this case. From both of them did not play nearly as physical as they needed to. Watford, in a lot of cases, he only played 18 minutes. He only had a couple of fouls early, and just got taken out of it. Just was not the physical player we've seen. I mean, he looked more like that slightly soft Christian Watford that had been sort of a problem in the past. It was a reason everybody sort of called him inconsistent. You hadn't really seen that from him in a while because he'd been very, very tough. Even at Michigan State against guys like Adrian Payne and Derek Nix, played a very, very physical game in that one. Not so much this time around. And Cody Zeller, obviously dealing with a guy that he's got, he's not too far off on weight, but Trevor Mbakwe is just a wider guy, just a bigger dude, and you can see the difference there. You can see the difference in the maturity and the physical maturity. Cody Zeller obviously has come a long way in 2 years. I mean, he was 215. Don't forget, when he came to Indiana, it's taken a lot of work for him to get to be as physical, as tough, and as big as he is. But he's still losing matchups like that when we're talking about basically a full-grown man that's that big and that tough and that physical and that huge. And so he seemed like he obviously fought for it. He found ways to get to the line, went 5 for 5, accomplished some things, but just really never got to be himself tonight. Elsewhere in Indiana, tried to score in other ways. Victor Oladipo had not a bad game, 6 for 9, 17 points and assists, no turnovers, and a steal. Wasn't fantastic, wasn't as good as you saw him at Michigan State on Tuesday night. Was still pretty solid, able to get to the lane for the most part. Actually, he was 5 for 10. Jordan Hulls was 6 for 9. I got those lines wrong. Oladipo had 16 points. Jordy Hulls was just lighting it up early, and the second half basically they made it pretty difficult for him to get a look at all. Wasn't able to just find much in motion. Basically, he had to handle the ball a lot. Both Yogi Ferrell and Jordan Hulls had to work really, really hard to get past the Minnesota press. They didn't turn it over a lot in the press, but it took a lot out of them in cases that it was tough for them to even just find openings. There was just somebody on top of them, and they were just doing a lot of ball handling. Not easy for Hulls to find threes in those cases. You're not getting lost in the game as he was kind of early and just getting some shots. He hits 5 3-pointers, but he hits 4 of them in the first half. Doesn't hit one until probably about 4.2 seconds left. Actually, he hits it from about 30 feet from the M, and that was kind of all the offensive production they were able to really get from him. Yogi Ferrell just had a tough night. 10 points, was 2 for 10. So just all in all, when you don't really get that much from Watford and Zeller, it's tough to play a complete game. It's tough to put a game away, and that's really what they weren't able to do. So basically, obviously this is not a devastating loss for Indiana. I mean, but it is problematic. They're obviously down to just a 1-game lead over Michigan State and Michigan and Wisconsin. All those teams have 4 losses. Indiana obviously wants to win an outright title, really lay claim to that first-round seed, but also really get an outright Big Ten title for the first time since 1993. It's a long time. It's something I think they obviously would consider that a really big feather in their caps. This makes it a little bit more difficult, and really at least puts them in a situation where to hold somebody off, to hold Michigan off, they might have to go beat them in Ann Arbor. So it does make things a little bit more interesting. Obviously, they've got Iowa next, and then Ohio State at home. Not easy games. They can very easily, they put themselves in a position where they can very easily lose a lot of the things they want. Want a Big Ten title to the number 1 seed. They're still in pretty good shape for that. Obviously, if the tournament bracket came out tomorrow, they would have both of those things. But basically, it just makes it a little bit difficult. They lose a game they didn't want to lose, and they do it because they pretty much got outworked. But this team has always really responded well to losses. Obviously, they haven't lost consecutive games yet. And obviously, their best game, I think, one of their best games this year was the Ohio State game after they got beat by Illinois. So this is one of those games where they obviously have to learn from, and I think, obviously there's a good chance you'll see a very, very different team in Assembly Hall on Saturday, but this one obviously for Indiana still stings. So thanks as always, everybody.